Hey guys, Whitney and I are still staying at home, we're still working in our shops, and we are still trying to shoot YouTube videos by ourselves until we can meet up again, and this is my week. We get so many questions from you guys asking how to refinish furniture, and it's not something that we usually do anymore, but 10 years ago when we started our website, it's what got us into building. So my son just dropped off a few pieces of furniture that he's inherited, and they're really sentimental to him, and he asked me if I would refinish them for him, and of course I said yes. I said I don't usually do that anymore, but for you, obviously I'll make an exception, so I thought I'd make a YouTube video out of it so that we can teach you guys how we do it. So here's one of the pieces that I'm going to be starting with, and it's just an old changing table. It's actually a pretty good size. He wants to use it as a dresser, and he'd like me to paint it black and change out the hardware on it. It's got this really cool pop-up side table that he likes. So I'm going to get started. So the first thing that I'm going to do is sand this entire piece. I'm not going to get all of the paint off. I want to get it clean, get it nice and smooth, and give it something for the new paint to stick to. I am going with a darker black paint, so I don't really need to worry about getting all this paint off. I'm going to be using my orbital sander, and I'm going to start with an 80 grit sanding pad. I'm going to follow that up with a 120 sanding pad, and then I'm going to finish it off with a 220. That'll give it a nice smooth finish. So I've got my 80 grit sanding pad on my orbital sander, and I'm just going to go over it one time, get the paint to come up a little bit. It's the most coarse grit of the three, so that'll be my first one. All right, that's looking pretty good. Now I'm going to move on to the rest of the cabinet. Okay, so I've got the top of this sanded, and now I'm going to work my way down, but I'm going to go ahead and take the drawers out because I can work on them a lot easier, and I also want to take off these knobs because I'm not going to use them, so I'll just take them off. It'll make it a lot easier to sand it. Oh my gosh, this is not fun. All right, I've got it sanded down pretty good with the 80 grit. Now I'm gonna go back with the 120 grit all over, and then followed by the 220. Lola, got a little friend with me again today. Lola, you need to get out of there. So helpful. Putting on a 120 grit now. So I've got the 80 and the 120 done. Now I'm gonna move on to the 220 grit, and then I can finally dust it off and start painting it. I've got this guy sanded down pretty good now. It's super smooth, so it'll take the paint without chipping. And now I've got to move on to these guys. All right, so now I'm moving on to the drawers, and they have these big knobs on them. He doesn't want the knobs anymore. That makes it a little bit easier for me because I don't have to sand them down and paint them. So I'm just gonna take them off and sand down the drawer faces, and then I'll be ready to paint. I have all of the drawers and the cabinet sanded. It's nice and smooth, but now I'm going to go back and just wipe off all of the dusty residues so that I can get a nice clean finish on my paint job. Sometimes it helps to wet the rag. I just use these soft paper towels, but it helps to wet it a little bit so it gets all of that dust. See? I'm using tricorn black and satin. It's a Sherwin-Williams paint. It's really beautiful, and it's going to be nice to have a darker paint color go over this since I wasn't able to get all of the paint off. But it is a latex satin tricorn black by Sherwin-Williams, and I will make sure that I put that in the description box below. So I like to use a foam roller when I'm painting furniture, whether it's furniture that we've built or furniture that I'm refinishing. So I've got my foam roller, but I also have a brush in case I need to get into some areas. I don't have my paint roller, my paint pan. We We do get a lot of questions about whether or not we use sprayers to paint our furniture, and we've had them before, but we've never really used them because they come with a pop-up tent, and I just feel like I kind of just want to get it done, and I feel like the prep involved with setting up the tent and cleaning out the sprayer and everything, I just feel like it's just quicker and easier just to paint it on. But if you like using a paint sprayer and you're fast with it, that's awesome. So I'm definitely gonna need 1 or 2 more coats. So I'm just putting a light coat on first, and then I will go back once it dries and add another one and see how we're at. I also try to make a W when I'm painting, because that way you don't see the lap strokes in between each run with your paintbrush. Then I'm using my paintbrush and going into the corners. Okay guys, I've got 1 coat on all the drawers. I've got 1 coat on the dresser. I'm gonna let it dry, go have a snack, and give it 1 or 2 more coats, and I'll check back in with you guys. All right, I needed about 2.5 coats of that paint, but everything is looking nice and smooth and shiny and satin and beautiful. So I'm gonna put these drawers in. I don't have the hardware yet, but I'm gonna go ahead and set those in there, and then I will be on the hunt for my hardware. The new handles that I picked for this dresser have 2 screws, so I'm using wood filler to fill the original holes left from the original knobs. Once the wood filler dries, I'm going to sand it down completely. Now I'm marking for the new holes and using a drill bit to drill each hole. The screws that came with this hardware aren't long enough. When this happens, instead of going out and buying new screws, I just use a paddle bit and drill from the inside of the drawer to bore out a little bit of the hole. I love the finish on this dresser. It looks so pretty with this beautiful tricorn black, and those handles really set it over the top. I think my son is gonna love his new dresser. Make sure to subscribe to our videos so you don't miss another tutorial. Happy building!